we'd like to thank News for Chinese for inviting us to speak here today. And Carl and I will begin by talking about communication. So I'm Dennis. I'm the president of Bay Echo this year, and I'm a senior at Lynbrook High School. And Carl will introduce himself.
Hi everyone, my name is Carl. I'm currently a rising sophomore at UC Berkeley, and I've been with Bay Echo for quite a long time now. This is like my 7th seminar that I've given with Bay Echo. And we're going to be talking about, both me and Dennis are going to be talking about one of the main themes of our organization. It was kind of founded for the entire purpose of the family, but a very specific role in the family, which was helping communication between parents and teenagers. So Dennis and I are going to begin off by giving a presentation on a survey that Bay Echo sent out to over 100 students. And then we compiled the data from the survey, and we analyzed the responses of the survey, and our presentation is about what the survey respondents said were the most common themes of problems that parents and teenagers experience, and then how to overcome these obstacles.
So, why are we even talking about communication? Well, our survey told us that most teens think communication is very important for a healthy relationship with their parents. And also, teens said that they feel more comfortable in a household in which they can easily talk to their parents. So this afternoon, we're going to try to enable you, parents and teens, to communicate more effectively with each other and build a stronger relationship.
Next slide. Okay. So in the survey that we sent out, we asked the survey respondents to list some issues that they commonly felt was hurting their relationship with their parent or with their teenagers. And most of the responses that we got back in terms of issues that were raised were the small conflicts within households that caused an escalated tension between parents and teenagers. Because it's rare that parents and teenagers have just a bunch of full-blown, gigantic fights all the time, but it's much more common for families to have small fights between parents and teenagers. And while the former is more noticeable, the latter could be just as damaging.
So in our survey, we asked teens what tears down communication between you and your parents. Well, some of the more common themes were nagging, hypocrisy, not listening, and loss of faith. In the next few slides, we'll go through what these things mean to a teenager, and maybe give an example of how it has happened in our lives. And later we'll explain how, or we'll try to explain how you and your teen can avoid such issues.
So I'm going to begin by talking about nagging. And to begin off, I think it's important to define nagging. And honestly, this is probably where the problem takes place, because what I think is nagging and what my mom thinks is nagging are usually completely different concepts. And that's why, we have these type of fights. So in terms of what nagging really is, I think as a teenager, I consider it just excessive reminding or excessive badgering of, my parents giving me advice or telling me to do things. And in the responses that people gave us regarding to nagging, people said, my parents would tell me to study for my grades, or study for that important SAT test, or do my chores all the time, and I felt like that was nagging, and I was frustrated by that. And that's really understandable. But I think one of the pieces that are missing is the parent's perspective, because from the parent's point of view, it's not nagging. It's, I'm telling my son or daughter to do his homework once or twice a day, because I think that's really important, and it is really important. But as teenagers, it's hard for us to really see that side. I think that I can at least admit that I'm still not mature enough to honestly comprehend everything that my mom tells me and appreciate her advice for what it is. And as a result, I think that because we talk about communication a lot, it's important to understand that in this process, both parties are going to have to give and take. So I think for the parent side, when it comes to nagging, I think what the parents should do is training the teen to be more responsible, not through always telling them to do things, but then trying to have them not do things. So for example, if your teenager just isn't consistently doing his or her homework, one thing that I think would be really powerful, or definitely more powerful than nagging, would be to let your teenager not do his homework and get a bad grade, get a C in that portion of the class. Show him what happens when he's not being responsible to his duties. That's so much more powerful to him or her. It's going to hit that student a lot harder than you always telling them to do their homework, because they really then see why you tell them, and the consequences of their actions. And that's something that I think not a lot of parents consider, because it seems like it could come at such a high cost of, oh my god, my son or daughter is going to get a bad grade. But when you look at the long-term benefit of what they might learn from this lesson, I think it's definitely an option to consider.
So another thing that probably comes up often is hypocrisy. And teens think that hypocrisy is doing something that you tell others not to do. For example, one of our panelists a few days ago, he was driving and he went at 26 miles per hour on a 25 mile per hour road. So his mom scolded him for that, but then later she drove at 27 miles per hour on a 25 mile per hour road. And that's basically what we're trying to talk about. Like, we suggest that parents be a role model to their teens, and we know this can't always happen because like parents can drink, teens can't drink. So in certain cases where parents are doing things that they tell their teens not to do, it would be nice if parents would explain to their teens why such thing is occurring, so then the teen would feel would better understand why he or she is not able to do something when his or her parents are. And Carl has an example.
Well, I definitely think that, I mean, for me at least, I know that actions just simply speak louder than words. And I think a lot of research backs the fact that when you're young, you're really impressionable to what other people do around you. Your parents do, your friends do, your peers do. And when you see things that conflict with what they tell you to do or with what they advise you to do, and then they end up doing the complete opposite or not being consistent with what they tell you to do, that leaves a greater impact on your life at a young age. So that's why I think we really suggest for parents then to be consistent with what they tell their teenager to do. It's not just about that one lesson right there, like, for example, this driving example. It's not necessarily, this hypocrisy issue isn't just about one issue. It's about a whole broad range of issues. When you see your parent completely not following his or her own advice, it's not just about, okay, well, I guess it's okay for me to speed then. It's more, my parents are trying to give me advice that they're not following. Why should I really respect their advice anymore? Or why should I listen to them? Slowly but surely, I think more and more hypocrisy that you're exposed to chips away at the relationship and trust that you have between you and your family. And that's why we really encourage parents to remain consistent with what they tell their teenagers to do. But then on the flip side of things, I think teenagers should also acknowledge the fact that sometimes parents are going to be hypocritical, but they have better reason to be hypocritical than you do. So in a drinking example, you know, maybe parents are going to tell their teenager, like, don't drink alcohol, it'll harm your health, it's not good for you. And then the parents will have a lot of alcohol at a party. And then the teenager might see that and think that's hypocritical. But we want to acknowledge both sides of the story. And we want to point out that, well, that may be true, but why it's more acceptable for them to drink, or to do certain things, is because they're more responsible than you. They can probably control themselves better when they've had alcohol than you can. And you're not experienced with that situation yet. So definitely, parents, be consistent to your motives. But at the same time, teenagers acknowledge why, or at least try to have a discussion on why your parents are being hypocritical, so you can come to some sort of understanding.
We encourage parents and teens, well, parents, to realize that we are capable of making decisions ourselves, and like what we have to say does matter. But also, parents and teens, we encourage mutual conversation in which both parties listen and talk so that both parents and teens can understand each other better and get their point across.
And the final thing that was brought up by a lot of the survey respondents in terms of what they felt was one of the biggest issues they had with their parents was kind of a loss of faith from their parents' side. And the examples that they brought up were when their parents made very judgmental remarks or very conclusive remarks about them. For example, you didn't do your homework and you got a bad grade in this test, in this class, so you must be stupid, or you must not understand math, or you must not be very good at this subject. Or assuming or expecting the worst outcome. So I remember my mom, when I was in high school, my mom used to call me from work, and then the first thing that she would say would be like, "You haven't done your homework yet, have you?" And for me, I mean, I understood why she did that, but for me, I was really hurt and I was really insulted because she just made the judgment on the spot without actually knowing anything of whether I did it or not. I mean, she was actually usually right. I didn't do my homework, but that didn't stop me from feeling bad about it. And I think the lesson here to take away is try something else. Instead of directly judging your son or daughter, if they get a bad grade, instead of saying, okay, you're not good at this subject, the other approach is ask questions. Because questions open the room for discussion, for communication, and for dialogue. making a judgment closes that off. It just says, I know what's right, I know what's going on, you're not good at the subject, that's it. But asking a question like, why did you not do well on this test? Was it because you didn't study well? Was it because you didn't get the material? Okay, you didn't get the material. Why didn't you? Was it because of the teacher or because of something you did? That actually allows both parties to, first of all, talk it out, and second of all, come to some sort of conclusion that both of them can agree to. Just saying, oh, you're not good at the subject, so I'm going to find my own method, like I'm going to hire you a tutor, doesn't require any input from the teen's side. And that's one of the problems with what happens when parents just make judgmental remarks. And that's a lot of the issues what the issues that the teenagers brought up were centered around.
So we also asked teens in this survey how they respond when they come across some of the issues that we have talked about. So one train of thought is the teens said, like, we'll just agree with what our parents say, even if we don't actually agree with it, and just hide it. And so this disguises the teen's own feelings and makes it so that the parent doesn't understand how the teen actually feels, and the teen closes off communication and stops talking about how he or she actually feels. Another group of teens said they would just ignore their parents and be silent or like go out of the room. And one teen said that she would go to her room and cry. And this also closes communication because now the parent has no way of accessing the child's actual feelings. And another group of teens said they would just attack back if they felt that their parents were abusing them in some way. And they would yell and they would fight. And this leads to a highly emotional argument in which understanding breaks down and reason breaks down, so that communication also breaks.
Okay. So on this slide, I think we were trying to get at the solution portion of our presentation, which is, parents, what can you do? Or what are some concrete steps, very actionable steps that you can take to open communication between your son or your daughter and yourself? And on here are kind of the three main points. The first is respect and trust. We're going to give examples of these in the next slides. The second is love and care. And the third is a system developed by author Josh McDowell called the 5 A's, which will be presented later in this presentation.
So after talking to a lot of parents and students, we found that respect and trust is the basis for open communication. So every kid is different, and what may work for one kid may not work for another kid. So parents, we encourage you to respect your child's uniqueness, and that there's not one mold that'll fit every kid on the earth. And also, respect and trust relieves tension, and we found that students are receptible to praise when they do something right, when they succeed at something, when they have some achievement, and they would rather parents encourage them to try harder if they have some if they fall into some pit while working on something. And also, teenagers like freedom, even though they're not exactly may not be mature enough to handle that freedom. We encourage that parents give their teens a little bit of freedom, because sooner or later they're going to be on their own. And when as they experience that freedom, we also encourage that parents watch their kids to make sure that, to prevent things from going really wrong. And to the teens in the crowd, when your parents give you that kind of freedom, we encourage that you respect the trust that they're placing in you, because that'll make it so that they want to give you more freedom, and they'll trust you, and there'll be a cycle of respect and trust.
In terms of the second portion, which is love and care, there are a bunch of small things that I think parents can do to open communication on a small level. And while these actions may upfront seem insignificant, I think they can go a long way over time. So asking teenagers about their day, that's definitely something that shows that you actually want to know. I think that we should clarify this. It's not just asking about their day in terms of school. I think people confuse it too. It's, oh, how was school? I think asking about their day, if you were to show that you're interested in things outside of school, not how did you do in class, but just how was your day? Did you meet any new people? What did you do during lunch and brunch? Are you going to watch any movies later? Things that shift the attention away from what the student may feel is like more nagging, like more academic based, but things that show, oh, okay, well, my mom actually cares about my social life, or things outside of what my grades are. Making or buying food for them. When I was in high school and I used to study for tests, at night my mom would bring me like plates of fruits that she would make, even though I never asked her to, and even though I never made it very clear that I appreciated it, I definitely did, and it's definitely something that I will remember for a long time. And one thing that I think is missing in a lot of Asian families, at least, is like physical intimacy. And this is something that's incredibly powerful in terms of establishing connection with another person. Like hugging somebody is something that, if done in the right opportunity, can be something absolutely life-changing, incredibly powerful. So that's why right now, I want to encourage the audience members. If you brought your son or daughter with you, turn to them right now and actually hug them. It's going to be awkward, I know. But try it. Just do it. It'll be worth it. And no, see, that's wrong. No. Sons and daughters, students in the audience, you can't just sit there and be like, okay, she's putting my arms around me. Oh, this is weird. This is awkward. I'm awkward. No, that's not the right thing. It's a give and take of both sides. The parents have to hug, but the students have to hug back. That's when it only makes sense. Let's try that again. This time, students, please hug your parents too. Let's try it. It's always weird in the beginning. It's always weird in the beginning. It's kind of awkward. But seriously, these things do go a long way. Next slide, please. You want to go over the project? Okay, so now we're going to invite our Beako's organizational advisor, Amy, to actually do the presentation on the 5 A's, because she has experience in family and marriage counseling.